Why hello kind people of the internet, my name's Clive Parkinson and today I'm going to write the fifth response to the Common App essay prompt, which asks us to discuss an accomplishment, event or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself and others. So this is the most popular prompt, so I thought I'd give it a try. And thinking about an accomplishment or a realization or event that sparked a period of personal growth wasn't very difficult for me. I think I'm probably going to talk about learning Chinese because it's something that I spent 10 years doing and obviously changed a lot during that period of time, so there'll be no shortage of personal growth to talk about. And I think that's kind of the strength of this prompt, to be honest, that it's always easy to think of an accomplishment or realization to write about. I think one of the things that I'm afraid about writing it is that there's not really a single story that I can tell that will really drive the essay forward or really make the reader want to read on to see what happened, because it can only end one way, right? I finish by learning Chinese, so I'm not really sure how I'm going to keep the reader's interest other than just trying to be clever with language. So let's see how I do. It began with strange noises in the shower and ended with being outclassed by 500 million peasants. It took hundreds of hours, thousands of characters, and 1 or 2 spy accusations, but over 10 years in China, I learned to speak Chinese. So that was my introduction. I always like to start an essay with some level of confusion, like some weird images like strange noises, shower, and 500 million peasants. You know, these aren't things that typically go together, and hopefully they would kind of pique some curiosity in the reader and want to make them figure out the puzzle of what this could possibly be. And of course, since it's not really a very good or interesting puzzle, I don't really drag it on for too long, and I reveal pretty quickly that the answer is I'm talking about speaking Chinese. Moving on. Don't ask why. It's really very unclear what you can do with it. At some point I must have thought, wouldn't it be great if I could express myself in Chinese? But by the time I couldn't, that self had long since eroded, its motives and purposes long forgotten. This new self, freshly emerged from a greasy cocoon of hot pot, lamb skewers and late night karaoke, has no idea. So really the purpose of that was just to show that obviously speaking Chinese was something that led to personal development. I thought it was a bit dark to end by saying that my former self had been long since forgotten, so I sort of wanted to add this extra sentence at the end, even though it doesn't really serve an extra purpose other than just to lighten the tone a little bit and throw in some fun images of life in China, you know, hot pot, lamb skewers and late night karaoke. And I think this essay, as I said, is really going to rely on those fun images to make it even slightly readable or interesting, because otherwise it would just be a very abstract discussion of, well, it would either be a super braggy discussion of my accomplishments, which is not interesting, or an abstract discussion of how I've changed as a person, which is also not really interesting. So I'm going to try and throw in as many fun images of life in China as I possibly can. Moving on. The easy part of studying Chinese was mastering thousands of characters and mapping them to brand new cultural concepts. What's the hard part? In the Beijing winter, when the old men's spit freezes on the pavement and you have to be careful not to slip on it, I would put on 3 sweatshirts, brew some tea, open my books, and rewire my brain. So again, obviously I've set this up by saying the easy part of studying Chinese was something that's obviously very difficult, learning thousands of characters. And the purpose of that, as I alluded, is to make the reader anticipate what the hard part is, and again to give them some kind of a reason to read on. Also, I wanted to throw in more imagery. I'll never forget slipping on old man's spit in Beijing when it drops below 0 for 3 weeks at a time, and you know, people spit on the road and you can just see all the little spit micro puddles. And I think these details are not just important but to keep things fun, but also to remind the reader that this essay was definitely written by me. And again, elsewhere in my application it will say that I spent time in China and that I've studied Chinese. And in case there's any doubt that this essay was written by a ghostwriter or an agency or a hired gun or something like that, I think these sorts of details will assure the admissions officer that I definitely came up with this by myself, because you can't really make this stuff up. Or a hired writer isn't likely to come up with a detail like that unless it actually happened to them. Moving on. The hard part was learning how to perform Chinese on command at the banquet table, inviting the audience to reflect on how my eagerness to learn demonstrated the brilliance of China. learning to be one of the big-nosed, yellow-haired monstrosities whose astonishing mimicry might have some entertainment value. Learning to smile politely when the uncle across the table wags his cigarette over the duck bones and declares, "Foreigners can never understand China." Learning to sense that nascent wave of humiliation, catch it before it wells up into resentment and anger, and let it go. Well, unfortunately, this paragraph's a little bit dark, but I think when you're talking about some accomplishment or activity, one way to reflect on how it changed you is to think about what the most difficult part of it was, which, unfortunately can take the essay to kind of a dark place or a sort of negative place. And I think that's hard to avoid when you're writing about essays about yourself. I think a lot of the moments where you really learn something are quite painful or negative and do involve you hating the world for moments. So I think the trick with these personal statements is to touch on that stuff but not to dwell on it. And as you'll see, I'll try and move off as quickly as I can, but also taking a lesson from it. Moving on. It really shouldn't have been that hard. It was merely the pain of scrubbing away at my entitlement, and usually late in life. How odd to have lived 19 years presuming that I had a natural right to be taken seriously, as though I were any different from anyone else in the world, who, whether because foreign, poor, minority or woman, endures being objectified, ranked and manipulated as a cultural symbol every day. And the frustration was nothing next to the deep well of gratitude I found, inspired by the migrant labourer who showed me how to make hot pot on the floor in the slums on the edge of Beijing, the cab driver in Taiwan who stopped in the middle of the road to spray me with bug repellent, and the aging punks running live music venues in industrial parks who had helped my band put on shows. So although I was previously negative in the last paragraph about how it was difficult to, when I was trying to speak Chinese, people would only understand it as me trying to perform for them, but they wouldn't really listen to what I was saying or take me seriously or take my opinion seriously or discount my point of view. I try and sort of piece that or place that in a context of other people's experience and show that it's something that helped me sympathize with other people. And I think it's important to show that I just don't think that I've been victimized. And I've seen a lot of personal statements where students seem to think that they were a victim and they want the university to feel sorry for them and help them out by accepting them. That's definitely the wrong strategy. So I wanted to get on that by solving this problem for myself and showing that I'd already learned something and that I didn't see myself as a victim at all. I also, originally I was going to end this paragraph with the idea of being manipulated as a cultural symbol and then put the gratitude in the next paragraph, but I ended up combining them into one paragraph because I didn't want to end on that sour note. I didn't even want to take the risk of the admissions officer thinking that this had meandered into some sort of discussion about social justice and people not being taken seriously enough. I wanted to also this sentence, I think it was important, where I talk about how people who are foreign, poor, minority or women are objectified and ranked, and I had some insight into that. I wanted to make that point, but there's a lot of abstract language there, and it's not really personal, and there's no real imagery there, so it's easy for the reader to sort of zone out and not pay attention. So I wanted to very quickly move away from that and start talking about this series of positive encounters that I'd had with people. And I think it's nice to share moments from your life that just seem to go really well, where you seem to be getting along with people and making friends, because that sort of stuff just kind of, put it another way, that's the sort of thing that a real winner in life would be experiencing, and I wanted to project that a little bit to the admissions officers to make up for the previous commentary, which while it's acceptable, I think if my whole essay were that, then I'm afraid that the readers would start to sort of subconsciously write me off as a loser or somebody who just is constantly living in my own world, dealing with imaginary struggles. Anyway, moving on. On reflection, learning Chinese was hard. I'm even a bit surprised that I studied every day for years, beyond the point where anyone could notice any improvement from one year to the next, and well after it had become apparent that it wasn't going to get me paid. But as much as I hated subjecting myself to the judgment of strangers thousands of miles from home, the experience was also exactly what I wanted. a unique experience on Earth, a deep psychological challenge, some sort of into the wild style, adapt or die exposure that would push the boundaries of my consciousness and make me better. So this is the part of the essay where I really get around to saying what I mean in terms of what I think. Again, back to the prompt, it asks us, what's the question? Your period of a new understanding of yourself and others, and I must admit, like, this wasn't something that I immediately knew the answer to. I had to sort of think about it, and writing this essay took me 3 days. I did it in like three-hour shifts. So I just woke up at 4 o'clock every morning and sat there for 3 hours, trying to sort of brainstorm and write down little snippets of what I was thinking, and think, really, what was it about? Well, what about learning Chinese somehow reveals something about me? This is essentially what I came up with. And obviously, I could have just said that learning Chinese was something that allowed me to show how persistent I was, or how hard I studied. Or I could have just said that it helped me sympathize with being a foreigner or somebody who isn't taken seriously for whatever reason. But those are all general lessons that I think maybe anybody would have learned from the experience. But I really wanted to push forward and try and find my personal reason for continuing with this, even after the point where I could really see like a clear financial reward for it. And it is what I say. I just kind of wanted to change myself somehow, or really challenge myself to see things differently. And I think that might be a reason that might be something that's unique to me in studying Chinese, that other people, even who studied Chinese, may not have been in it for, or at least not to the same extent. And again, it's something that reveals my value system and what I really care about. And I'll get into this in the next paragraph a little bit, but my values are only really revealed by learning Chinese when it becomes clear that I struggled for it, or I gave up something to do with it. I gave up something to do it. So let's move on to the next paragraph. I once had a Chinese professor who waited until the last final was turned in, then looked around, dropped her voice, and asked us why we bothered. I had no answer. I spent 10 years of my life trying to learn something that absolutely breaks my brain, and even at the end of the road, there are literally a billion people who can still tell me I'm doing it wrong. Sometimes I wish I'd just learned how to program computers, or do taxes, or unblock the sink. So, as I said earlier, I'd already really said what I needed to say in this essay about my reasons for doing Chinese, and also getting onto my priorities as a person in life in general. But it was a weird kind of abstract way to end it, and I wanted to add some drama in the conclusion. So what I tried to do here was sort of raise the tension by maybe making the reader think that I was going to go in the other direction and completely reject learning Chinese and regret learning Chinese and wish that I'd never done it. And also make clear, as I was mentioning earlier, that I definitely did give up something to do it. And when we're talking about accomplishments, I think the really interesting accomplishments that you'll want to write about are things that did require a huge time investment and did require you to give up other things that are good. Where even when you look back at what you did, it's not necessarily clear that this was the only good, reasonable option to do. I mean, obviously learning Chinese is great, and I learned a lot and it was fun. But, I could have learnt to program a computer, or learnt to I could be a lawyer or a doctor by now, or something like that instead. And, there are times, I think, when you're going to look back and wonder if that was really the right choice, if I really made a right decision. And it's exactly that sort of self-examination, and say, why did I choose, even whether I'm knowing what I know now, or even then, why did I really choose to go down this road when there were many other really great other defensible roads that I could have gone down. Anyway, moving on. But if I could do it over again, I would. It's not for everyone, but it was something I had to do. I just needed to know what it would be like. So this is where I sort of release that tension that I built up in the previous paragraph, where I make the reader think that perhaps I regretted everything in my life. And in the final sentence I say, but it's cool, this is what I want to do. I actually did make this decision because actually to me, sort of rewiring my brain and trying to develop a perspective that nobody else would have, and walking my own path down life was something that was so important to me that I did, and I would give up. I would give up, the certainty of maybe just learning a profession and getting paid. And so I think it's sort of crucial to say, if I could do it over again, I would. And I've talked before about how it's sometimes nice in a personal statement to give the reader a hint at what you would do next, what your next steps are. And obviously I haven't said I'm going to go and learn Japanese or Hindi now, but I have indicated that, I would still continue to pursue a path that would give me a lot of insight over a path that would give me perhaps just a lot of money. And that's still something that's a part of me that somehow defines me, and that they should take away from the personal statement. So obviously I haven't given very clear next steps for the admissions officers, but it's still better than nothing. And also, as I say, it's not for everyone. I think that the strategy here, or my strategy with this essay, is definitely not to make the admissions officers think that I am the best student possible, that I succeed more than everyone else and do more homework than everyone else and process information faster than everyone else and ask more questions in class and help out my classmates more than anyone else. I don't need to prove that. In fact, all I need to make them think is that I'm just an irreplaceable student, that if they didn't accept me to their campus, then there would be something missing, or there would be a perspective that they could have had that they now don't have because I'm not there. And that's a totally sufficient thing to say to admission. That's a totally sufficient argument to make. Again, I don't have to be better than everyone else. I just have to be different than everyone else, and I have to try and think about how and why I'm different. And as I said earlier, that wasn't actually easy. It did take me several hours of kind of cracking at it to come up with a good answer. So anyway, this is a personal statement. It's certainly not the best personal statement in the world. It's not the only way I could have approached writing a personal statement. And I think from the perspective of starting to write, it's helpful to accept that an okay personal statement is an okay personal statement. I mean, you don't have to write the perfect personal statement, and you'll see a lot of people writing things and trying approaches that work really well for them, and they could even work well for you, but they just don't fit in your particular statement. So I think it's important to focus on writing the statement in terms of what's best for that statement or what's best for that essay, and not just looking at other people's statements and thinking, oh, they did this and that I wonder if I could incorporate that too, and making some sort of a mess of a Franken-statement. I think as long as your statement shows that you've reflected, you've earnestly tried to reflect on your life experiences, and you've learned some kind of lesson from it, and you even learned some sort of lesson about who you are versus other people in the world, and you can show that you're a grateful person, that you can productively learn from difficulties, and not raise any other red flags, show enough detail to prove that you wrote the thing yourself. As long as, again, you're hitting all of those things, uniting the various elements of your application and not raising any red flags, then I think a good enough personal statement will be good enough for you. Well, that's all I've got. If you'd like to see me write another one of these, let me know which one. And in the meantime, you can check my website, cliveparkinson.com. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay hydrated. Bye.